I guess I should start this video by saying or explaining what Anita Sarkeesian's videos are and what they actually represent versus what internet culture believes it represents or means for the medium of video gaming. I already expect this video to garner a lot of hate by people who I've already watched Thunderfoot's video or the Amazing Atheist video and have already made up their minds about feminist frequency and Anita Sarkeesian without actually watching her videos. That seems to be the majority of the people making comments about her videos now. That her videos represent some sort of feminist takeover of video games or attempted feminist takeover of video games, and the whole issue is just clouded with all sorts of people who don't agree with a part of her video or maybe an example she used in her video, therefore her entire video sucks to them. People who genuinely believe that she is trying to get rid of the kind of games she criticizes in her videos, which is not the point of her videos at all, and people who just generally miss the point by focusing on her political ideology, which is feminism, also missing the point of the video. So allow me to set the record straight. Anita Sarkeesian's video is simply an objective, critical analysis of the way women are portrayed in video games, from the early days of video games to roughly now. Even saying in her video that it is possible to still enjoy a hobby that you like while looking at its more critical aspects. What I'm going to ask now is a series of questions, not so much directed at people who are critical of Anita's video, but people who absolutely hate her. These are simple questions, and these have a lot to do with her video. 1. Do you think the did trope, the damsel in distress trope, is not overtly used in video games? Do you think it's not a problem? Once again, this question is free for you to answer, but if I were to give my own personal opinion, then I'd say it's pretty hard to dispute that the damsel in distress trope is not overtly used in video games. I mean, I don't know how else to really put it. Since the golden age of gaming, gaming's demographics have been mostly male. And there was no problem with that, but now the demographics are widening, and it's a conversation worth having. I really don't get why we have to fly off the wall every time someone decides to have it. Whether you think these problems will solve themselves with the widening of the gaming demographics is kind of irrelevant here. The thing is, nothing bad can come from having this conversation. I really don't see how. A lot of the things in her first video she talked about were simple facts. I mean, Save the Victimized Women was mostly what was used as a plot device back in the 80s and 90s. And while the situation has changed with technology, the trope hasn't. It's back full force with more and more victimized women, and the trope takes on more gruesome forms as the medium develops. This would be very hard to dispute, and yes, there are exceptions. Many people who object to Anita's video have pointed out that Mirror's Edge with Faith and, Half-Life 2 with Alex Vance are all, counterpoints to the thesis that, our market is now oversaturated with this did trope. But the thing is, they're not really counterpoints. I mean, I love Half-Life 2, and I will acknowledge that Alex is a pretty empowered character in it, but it's the exception, not the rule. Show me how many women in video games are simply damseled characters whom you have to save. And then show me how many women you can actually play as in video games who are not damseled characters and who are not completely one-dimensional. I'm sorry, but that's the case in a lot of these games. I mean, when I was playing Max Payne 1, I never really cared about the Max Payne's wife in the game. It's simply just a plot device to jump off and start the game. Even in Anita Sarkeesian's Legend of Zelda example, she points out that Zelda is not always damseled in every single, Legend of Zelda game featuring her. However, in most cases, she is damseled. You can point out numerous games where this trope is used as a plot device. It's not even something you have to try, especially in mainstream games. I appreciate, many dissenters to Anita's video trying to point out that, we're somehow motivated to play the game of, Max Payne or maybe God of War by, remembering or picturing people we love in that damsel position, but I don't really buy that. I really think that it's more just to do with, we have to have a story to start the game, and, that's the most convenient story. Because in order for me personally to connect myself to a female character, that female character has to be more than just a plot device. Like the Darkness, the female character in that who gets killed, to start the story is just kind of a passive plot device. She's not really fleshed out the same way Alex Vance is or Faith is in Mirror's Edge. I mean, can you really remember the names of, damsel female characters from games you played, such as Beatrice from Dante's Inferno or Marie from Castlevania Lords of Shadow? And, that's part of her problem. It's just that they're simply portrayed as kind of property that's taken away from the player. Again, this is a generalization, but a generalization that holds weight, as it is a generalization that can largely be verified by simply looking at the medium in its current state today. I again do think that this is a conversation we should have, and anybody who says that this isn't somehow a conversation we should have because it isn't addressing like some broader context of like rape in third world countries or female circumcision, I would say that that's kind of nonsense. If I'm into games and I'm a pop culture critic, then I'm going to criticize, things in pop culture. I may criticize things in games. This doesn't mean that I automatically have to, address broader topics or I'm a horrible person. That's certainly not the case, and it's not the case with Anita either. She's not barred from talking about gender issues in video games because video games are somehow a narrow topic. And if you think it's petty for her to talk about female issues in video games while not addressing some larger, broader topic about female issues in, the third world countries, then, it's even more petty to throw an entire piss fit over it like it's going to be the end of the world. Anybody who says that is just doesn't know what they're talking about. Question 2 and 3 are quite simple and can be answered in relatively black and white answers such as yes or no. Do you think Anita is saying that games can turn players into misogynists, or that, these games are purposefully made sexist by their developers? Because if I were to take the do you think out of these questions, the answer would be no. In her second video at the 2050 mark and the 2000 mark, she addresses this, she dispels this notion. She basically says that these games are not going, she doesn't expect these games to turn players into misogynists, and that she doubts that these game developers are doing, are trying to make their games like this intentionally to subjugate women. I mean, this is stuff she says. You can actually go to her video and you can confirm this. Thunderfoot brought up two, relevant quote-unquote points in his video that turned out not to be relevant at all. That these games were not made to make feminists happy or, not made or just made to make a profit. And, it doesn't really matter that they weren't made to make feminists happy. It's not the point of her video. In fact, her video is not really tied to feminism. It's just, female issues, gender issues in gaming. A lot of controversy also comes from her, apparently quote-unquote saying, and this is definitely quote-unquotes, that, these games can harm women. The closest she ever says to that, is that these games may perpetuate already existing viewpoints against women, not that it would create viewpoints against women. Which is a completely different thesis. And, of course, they were made to make a profit, but that's part of the problem. They're not really considering what the underlying message that these games may be sending, in her words. Now, saying that video games can turn you violent or into a misogynist, I'd be inclined to disagree with. That means it would have to affect your conscious mind and make you, take a certain ideology or make you, force you to take a certain stance on something. that would make you more violent or more prone to be a misogynist. I don't think that games do that at all. However, when considering the subconscious effect of games and other media, this is something we can confirm with, other problems we have with media, such as beauty and how, too much exposure of, one-dimensional models can affect the body image of women. Too much of the conversation regarding Anita's video is wasted on, how horrible her feminist ideology is, and, if the situation were reversed, like if women subjugated men and if men were the damsel in distress, feminism wouldn't give an outcry about it, and it's still irrelevant. That'd be a good conversation to have when that becomes the case. It's not the case now. It simply means, it's just the case now that there's too many of these kind of stories, oversaturating gaming. And, they won't go away, and I kind of don't want them to go away. But, as gaming's demographics widen, it becomes more of a problem. It's a problem we should talk about. If games want to be taken seriously as an art form. I don't really think if people realize this now, but nothing at this point can get games censored or banned. This is a fight we won back in 2011. Now we have to have more mature discussions on these issues, and that means, acknowledging that video games might have an effect on our mind. Video games are a form of media, and they probably have the same effects as other forms of media. Let's acknowledge that. In fact, these are problems that, gamers have had a long and hard bone to pick for a long time. I mean, the controversy surrounding Metroid Other M is just like yesterday to me. The supposed weak portrayal of Samus next to her stronger male superior officer that caused such a stir. Has a lot to do with the same problems Anita is talking about in her video. This isn't something to throw a piss fit over, guys. I guess my final question for this video is the biggest question of all, because it has to do more with what some would say the quote-unquote ethics of her videos. And I just have something to say about that real quickly, and the question is, do you believe she is talking to you? And this is the biggest question of all, because she's not. Her videos were meant for more of a classroom sort of oriented environment with teachers. And I fully expect if a teacher actually asked her a question about her videos or questioned some of the motives or some of the sources she used to make her videos, she would respond to the teacher. She has no obligation to respond to people on YouTube or people on the internet. She never had a obligation to respond to those kind of people. And saying that she somehow has to get the internet's approval to, prove her videos or prove that she has a right to make them or that she is a good spokesperson is out of their minds. This shouldn't have been an issue in the first place. This is something that the internet blew up and that the internet caused to be a problem. If you want to know why she doesn't respond to, questions on her video, it's because that bridge was burned a long time ago. A long time ago when the majority of the internet decided to collectively harass her. And that's not good. It doesn't send a good image for gaming. It doesn't send a good image for anyone on the internet, and it's completely unjustified. Do you honestly think that if she somehow allowed comments that, maybe 1 out of 100 of those comments would be constructive criticism of her video, rather than inflammatory comments simply launched by people who don't like her? Once again, she is not talking to YouTube. You are not on her radar. Many people also bring up that she needed a lot of money to apparently make this video. And, I just find it to be another self-righteous appeal to, their right to be angry. The thing is, she wasn't going to receive as much money as she did had this issue not been blown up and had she not been harassed. A lot of the money she received was out of sympathy for, her position, for her unique position of being against the internet and being, fighting the tidal wave of hate and harassment that was coming against her. You didn't pay for that video. You didn't give her money for that video. That is a complete non-issue to you. That matters zero. That has no relevance to the argument. Now, offering up my own critique of Anita's video, I would say that while she doesn't, while she doesn't say a lot of the stuff she's accused of saying, had she worded her videos better, she probably wouldn't have, you know, been taken. It probably wouldn't have. It probably would have been harder to take it the wrong way, such as using terms such as regressive and using the terms such as patriarch. I kind of object to those terms. I also object to looking at this issue from a feminist standpoint rather than a broader storytelling standpoint, as I do believe it can kind of limit what you can say on the matter. See, when developers make these kind of stories, I do agree that they're kind of dry and, they're overused in this medium, but that's an issue of storytelling. We need to tell better stories with more fleshed out women, and, that can kind of encourage gaming to become more of an art form, and we can grow through that. Another problem I had with their first video is the fact that it was too much like sort of an infomercial. It was just saying what we already knew. And that was my problem with it. Not that it was radical or anything to that matter, because it really wasn't. Some of her examples probably could have been better looked into, so she could probably have better examples rather than the ones that seem to have blown up and incinerated, like Ico. There are also examples which I disagree with, such as her Gears of War sort of example, as Gears of War is an example of a franchise that uses its women very, very well. But overall, her videos were okay, not terrible like a lot of people sort of try and claim it is, but not really setting the world on fire. It's mostly just pointing out what we know and looking at it through the lens of gender issues.